Automobilista 2 is now likely just 10 days away from full release to the public. In this video, I'm going to share my thoughts on where I feel the most anticipated sim of 2020 falls in the scale of sim racing drivability. I'll be testing it out with my direct drive wheel, as well as putting it through its paces with a consumer wheel. Let's get into it. What's up guys, it's Mike for SimRacing604. So as mentioned in the introduction, I wanted to test out how the hotly anticipated Automobilista 2 drives. Other than celebrity-filled races, AMS2 is still probably the biggest news in sim racing. People have a lot of questions leading up to its release, but ultimately its success is going to come down to how well it drives. So what I'm doing in this video is using not only the Accuforce Direct Drive wheel that I commonly use, but also seeing if a more popular and mainstream wheel like my T300 still gives a good driving experience. So a bit of housekeeping I should do first is to define what I'll refer to as drivability. I summarize the overall driving experience in a racing sim as its drivability. The two factors are the force feedback and the car physics. The car physics are tough to grade, but as a rule, I look for what happens when the car's grip levels are tested, or how a given sim reacts to situations like curbs, wet tracks, and standing water on the track, as well as tire degradation. Also, how do the car's steering, suspension, and aerodynamic systems cause the car to move on various sections of the track and at various speeds? A reliable barometer that I've looked to recently is when a real-world driver is able to more or less replicate their in-real-life driving in a sim, like what we see with David Perel or Max Verstappen. As far as force feedback, it's somewhat easier to judge. Does the sim allow you to feel what the car is doing? In general, understeer should be a very noticeable effect, as well as curbs, and there should be some road feel based on a respective track surface. Long story short, if a car behaves sensibly at the traction limit and the force feedback effects are detailed and varying in intensity, I rate a sim high in drivability. Alright, so getting back to the core topic of this video, Automobilista 2 has recently moved to Beta 4, or the fourth iteration of the beta leading up to the release at the end of this month. The real highlights of the recent updates for me are changes to the drivability of the cars. I had previously said that AMS2 already drives about 80 to 90% as well as AMS1, and I'll share my feelings on how the title drives in a moment. But first I want to highlight what's changed. RITSA has substantially updated the tire model across all tire types and made lots of changes to force feedback. You can read part of the changelog in the description below to see some of those changes. Overall, the game feels different than earlier betas. I never had an issue previously with how AMS2 felt, so my opinion hasn't swayed drastically, but I have seen a few videos where people's opinion of AMS2's drivability was significantly improved. For me, it's polish on an already great racing sim. The drivability of any given sim is a very subjective thing to discuss, of course, but after the updates, I'd put it in the same class at least as AMS1, but definitely it has its own flavor of force feedback. AMS2 definitely feels different than its predecessor. I spent several hours alternating between the two sims, and even though I'd rank them both very high in drivability, my experience is quite different between them. You can see my usual sim racing hardware details in the video description below as always, but please bear those in mind when I tell you what I'm feeling in-game. AMS1 to me still has the advantage in force feedback detail. At least in the beta version I'm running, I don't feel the road bumps as much as I did previously. The curb feel to me is nearly identical, but the road feel and the feeling of weight transfer when cornering that was synonymous with AMS1's force feedback is not as present for me as it was in the previous title. It's not that either is totally absent in AMS2's beta, it just feels less present than before. The physics for me, however, feel as good or better. Running identical cars and tracks in both AMS1 and AMS2 gives a slightly different result on track. In general, the cars I've tried feel more predictable in the sequel. What really sold me on the first AMS was the feeling of driving on the limit in certain cars and shaving fractions of seconds lap after lap. That feeling seems equally present in AMS2, and it makes this one of the most fun and best driving sims in my collection. And please take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt, and remember that this is still a beta version, and the whole topic of drivability in sims in general is very subjective. Something I like to do mentally in racing sims once I have the force feedback tweaked to my liking is put them into tiers of drivability. In Tier 1, or the highest class of drivability, I'd put AMS 1, Assetto Corsa Competizione, and R Factor 2. All of these give very informative force feedback with little need for tweaking, and the physics of the cars seem generally in line with what I might expect from the real-world car. The second tier is about the same quality of drivability as Tier 1, but it takes me more tweaking to get them to that point. For me, I put Assetto Corsa and Race Room Racing experience in that category. And before the iRacing crowd gathers their pitchforks and sets fire to my channel, just please note that I don't play enough iRacing to really have a valid opinion. So I took the time to really get a feel for how AMS2 Beta drives with the new update, and at this point I'd say it's comfortably in Tier 1, and for me at least, I put it in the same league as AMS1. And while some of you may agree with me, many won't. Suffice it to say that I feel very good about AMS2's drivability, and I would recommend it to those who agree with my tier rankings of drivability. When I switched to my Thrustmaster T300, I was very impressed. Using a direct drive wheel like my Accuforce can have the effect of making average force feedback feel quite good, but that wasn't the case here. Switching to the T300, I was expecting the drivability of the cars to feel substantially worse, but in fact it felt excellent. There was less road feel, and I had to turn the gain up about 20% to get the curbs feeling roughly as strong as my Accuforce, but overall I was very impressed. Again, it's quite different to AMS1 with both the Accuforce and the T300, but I find myself more consistent with lapping in the sequel. The car physics in AMS2 are outstanding, and I was impressed with the force feedback detail both with the direct drive Accuforce and with the belt drive T300. And just a couple of points to wrap up the drivability topic. If you're expecting AMS2 to drive like Project Cars 2, I have some bad news for you. I can draw very few parallels between the drivability of PC2 and AMS2. Now, I'm not a Project Cars 2 hater by any means. I've invested over 200 hours into the title and done countless videos on it. With some custom force feedback files, I really enjoy driving several of the car track combos in PC2, but I don't consider it to have top tier force feedback or car physics. And with that said, Automobilista 2 doesn't have much in common with how the cars drive. There isn't much car content shared between the two titles for a direct comparison, but the behavior of the cars during oversteer and understeer and the feeling through the wheel are very different between AMS2 and PC2. And the second point, and a very important point, Automobilista 2 will support custom force feedback files. Those of us that ran Project Cars 2 on PC had the option of downloading free custom force feedback profiles, then loading them in-game, which made Project Cars 2 feel more like other sims. And Automobilista 2 will have the same option. We'll be able to go online, download custom force feedback profiles, and I'm sure a lot of people are hard at work right now developing those custom force feedback files, and it'll be exciting to see what comes down the pike. So even if you don't initially like the force feedback in Automobilista 2, keep an open mind and just know that the community will be able to customize the force feedback feel in AMS2. So in summary guys, I've now spent a good amount of time driving the beta releases of Automobilista 2 with both a consumer grade wheel and a more high-end direct drive wheel, and I can say I'm very impressed with both. Considering the difference in price is about 3 to 1 going from my Accuforce to my T300, I expected there to be a drop off in drivability, but it seems that AMS2 is on point with either wheel. I'm very happy thus far with the beta version of AMS2, and a major part of that is the pleasure of driving it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.